Hi, everyone. Welcome. Wow, this is so exciting. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us this morning. You are watching Coffee Time with Masterminds, and today's episode is really important. We're talking about organizational learning, which is the process of collecting information, reflecting on it, and using the findings to improve our performance or our practices. And there hasn't been a more obvious time to do this than now, but not just because of the pandemic. But I learned last week that about 90% of nonprofit executives care deeply about learning, but very few of them report having a process in documenting that learning and capturing their new knowledge. It is our hope that after today's coffee time, you'll be leading your organization toward the path of organizational learning. This is exciting. It's about innovation and adaptation. So we invite you to have a cup of coffee with us, join the conversation that hopefully will last as long as your coffee does. And for those of us who are new, we want you to know that Coffee Time with Masterminds is a series of conversations about urgent issues for today's nonprofit leaders. Our conversations last about 30 minutes, and we invite you to join the conversation. And you can start by saying hi, telling us where you're from. We're finding that we're getting a lot of engaged listeners throughout the country, and we are so excited by that. So if you're in a different state, we are in Connecticut and Boston, but if you're in a different state, show it off and let us know where you're calling from. So in the meantime, I'll start with introductions. I'll start with me, and then our co-panelists will introduce themselves. I am Cynthia Rojas. I'm excited to be here. I am the co-founder and principal of To Your Growth, which is a consulting firm that works on organizational development, change management, and leadership development. I'm now going to turn it over to my co-panelist, Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca.
Hi, Cynthia. How are you? How are you, Pina? Good morning.
Morning.
I know we have listeners from my class last night and earlier this week, and also all the way from Vermont today. So hopefully we get some engagement. They have some questions. I told them to ask live today.
Nice.
So we'll see. But my name is Rebecca Tuttle. I'm the founder and creator of Grant Right Now, and our mission is Grant Writing for Good. We help schools, nonprofits, and small businesses find, write, and secure grant funding, and we teach them how to do it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. And Peter Blakely, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Cynthia. I am Peter Blakely, founder and principal of Blakely Consulting, and I help mission-based organizations measure and maximize their impact.
All right. So we're getting some introductions. We have Renee Calendar. Good morning, Renee. We have Sandra Brown from Rhode Island. Yay!
Yay!
And Benjamin Burgos is from East Haven, Connecticut. So keep telling us if you're out there. It's always exciting to see and hear from the audience. So please join us. As I mentioned before, today is a conversation that is centered around making your organization a learning organization, actively taking what you're learning during this time of innovation and adaptation. It is so important. And this is the moment to do it so that as you're preparing for your post-COVID future, you are ready with tools. I want to ask Peter, because she works with organizations and helping them measure and maximize their impact. So that's an important skill. Why is learning essential now?
Many programs are adapting their models, either to work around some resource that's not available right now, like physical classrooms and the ability to gather, or to meet a new need that's been created by the pandemic crisis. These are not just temporary workarounds. They're fundamental changes in how we show up for the communities that we serve. And it's very important that mission-based organizations be focused and intentional in how we show up for these communities. We're never going back to the past. So let's be careful and thoughtful about how we document these innovations and learnings so that we can make conscious, deliberate, and thoughtful decisions about which of these changes we're going to bring forward with us into the post-COVID future.
Peter, you used a lot of words carefully, intentional. And so I think that's important to highlight because people are still responding and managing to the crisis. So what should leaders be thinking about or keeping in mind for the future now? What could they be doing now?
So one of the things to keep in mind is, crisis tends to reinforce inequality. So we want to be thinking right now, are we reaching who we need to reach? And are we being deliberate in how we adapt our programming to ensure that we're reaching our most important or our most vulnerable populations? I think that's really important. It's also important to operate from, we've spoken several times on this show about being in a crisis, but not operating from a place of crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really
reminds us all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
The role of the leader in this organization to keep an eye on the organization's mission and fundamental values and not get blown off course by all this chaos.
Yeah.
That's interesting because last night in our class, we had a question about when we're writing grants, are we writing those grants to the funder's mission and losing sight of our own? And so we talked about that mission creep, that mission chasing that we don't want to do. We should always be mission focused and then find others to partner with and collaborate with that are mission complementary.
Yeah, I mean, we should save that for, that's a whole show.
Absolutely.
About not chasing funding and not adapting your program for whatever funding is available right then, but finding funding that supports programming that is in your place of strength and how important that is.
I like that. What tools can people use? Because I think the more we give people, our listeners, the more easily it would be for them to adapt these new practices.
Yeah, and this is a complicated process. Like you pointed out, a lot of organizations want to be doing it. Most organizations aren't doing it. It is complicated and it requires systems and processes and deliberate implementation. It's going to feel clunky at first because it's like exercising a new muscle, right? It's going to feel strange and awkward. And then ways that disseminating information is shared through the organization. And that does not need to be high tech. I think, whiteboards are probably one of the most underrated pieces of technology.
Look at.
I mean, look, we both whiteboards. Like, how do we stay on track, right? As small business people, whiteboards. And I think some of the organizations I know that are most successful in terms of keeping on track, keeping teams aligned around their metrics, are using hand-drawn posters and whiteboards to celebrate their wins and document their progress.
Yeah, it could be
It's
that
visual.
Yeah.
We have a question.
We do.
We do. So,
go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah.
From Vermont.
Yeah, from Vermont asks, what is one of the ways you recommend showing up for your community online?
That is a tough one because a lot of programs are going online, and that is the most obvious example of a workaround for a resource that we don't have. It brings up so many equity issues, both positive and negative. And so I think it's something we really, really, really should be studying and looking at. On the one hand, here's this incredible opportunity to reach people who have always had barriers to accessing your physical space, right? So individuals with health needs or physical disabilities can suddenly get places that they couldn't go and participate in things where they might have had barriers before. If you add on to that the potential to interact with things in an asynchronous manner, right? So if now you're delivering a lesson over Facebook Live, and that means that a student who works can watch this live later and stay with the class, I think there's so much potential in that. But for years we said, oh, we can't serve these communities, adult communities, economically disadvantaged communities, because they don't have the technology. So let's really be documenting, do they have the technology? Is this working? What are the advantages? And it's also a place to go back to, like, what is your mission? So if you don't have the physical space and you're going with online communication, what is the one most important thing to communicate? There are plenty of organizations who are saying the curriculum doesn't really matter right now. It's about the community, and we just need to be doing things for building community. We just need to keep people connected to the resources that they need, and we don't need to be teaching the lessons. And I think that that is a really valid choice if that's what's on mission for you.
Yeah, I think also culture has been, organizations have been impacted dramatically, but their culture is also going to look differently. And when you're talking about innovation and adaptation, what leaders need to be aware of is, do you have a safe environment or safe culture where your staff can feel like they can be innovative and try something new?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely a prerequisite.
Yeah.
You have to have that, that notion of psychological safety, that appears here, but you definitely, and that comes from leadership, have to create an environment where people can run experiments and where it's okay to try something out and then agree that it didn't work.
Yeah.
I think that agreement that it didn't work is huge there, and not the freedom, but it's almost like we heard for years and years in the nonprofit, give yourself permission to do this or to try. Nobody needs permission. If you have an idea and it's innovative, right now we're all trying to problem solve and move solution forward. Just put it out there. Just give it a try. Everyone to agree to do it. I love that. That's a great point.
I love the expression that I've been hearing recently, fail forward. There's nothing wrong with failing. Fail, document it, move forward. Love it. So let's all commit to failing forward.
Yeah. Model coffee time with failing forward.
I do, like we're doing with this show.
Yeah, I do want to mention something. I didn't want to interrupt you before, Peter, but so we had a viewer email us and comment about our whiteboards. And I so appreciate, and just for the people watching us, I want you to know that we do talk about our whiteboards. Rebecca and I have a little bit of a competition. I too have one as big as hers, and we're trying to see if we could get Peter to get one as well. But I love when you say use your whiteboard, use poster paper, right? Because I don't want to give leaders another task or more advice that feels overwhelming during this time, because we want to be sensitive to we are still managing a crisis and planning for the future. But I think your tips about whiteboard, poster paper, write it down, have a conversation. Where can they have these conversations? Who should be in the conversation? You have any thoughts about that?
Oh, everybody, right? So obviously the program staff, but particularly frontline staff, the people who have the most contact in the community, and community members, right? It's the people that you're serving. They are a resource in this, and they have a lot of knowledge about the situation. The documentation process doesn't need to be complicated. right? I don't want people to think like they can't make any adaptation without pulling in the entire board, right? And this certainly shouldn't be slowing the rate of innovation or adaptation. But like, let's think of this as a journal, So could we have a simple template where we document, here's why we were looking at a change, right? Here is the resource that was missing or the outcome that we weren't getting. Here is the experiment that we conducted, what we expected to happen. Did it happen or not? And therefore, what are we bringing forward? And this could be a 5-minute process during your staff meeting, during your program meetings, right? Just jot this down and then imagine that you have this ongoing journal of this. So later in time, you can flip back and understand why the program design is the way it is and what parts you still need to be doing.
I love that. I love that. And Rebecca, I'm sure you have something to respond, but I do want to add that for my own practice, I find documenting why I made a decision is just as important, because I can almost guarantee you 9, 10, 11 months from now, you may not remember why you decided to go that route when now another route seems so obvious. And the why becomes important to the learning. That's good. But Rebecca, do you have something to share in terms of how this relates to funding and grant writing and building relationships with funders?
So I just want to touch on that quick. The why also helps with the buy-in when you're trying to get everyone to rally around.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have a question.
Yes.
So I'll hold off on my remarks because I think it's important to get some of these questions out. But if you're someone who uses public resources, we had spoken earlier about the technologies and are those technologies available in everyone's home and some of the barriers to accessibility. If you're someone who uses public resources like a library to access those types of things, then how do we adapt that going forward? And that's certainly something that those organizations are going to have to adapt internally to make those and continue those accessibilities for us. And
a great example of an organization that they've really shifted their mission, from being a place with a lot of books, which 100 years ago was a technology and knowledge center, right? To how do we operationalize that mission now, right? And they are a technology and knowledge center, and I would say even more importantly, a community center at this point in history. Yeah,
absolutely. So when you say, I'm looking at your question. When you say adapt for that going forward, when you say public resources, do you mean technology? So we'll wait for C to respond, just to make sure we answer her question. And so, Rebecca, do you have any thoughts, responses to what Peter was saying in terms of how it relates to funding?
Well, funders want to know, what are you proposing to do? And what is the solution you're proposing to that unmet need? And going forward, after the duration of this funding stream, right, this grant is maybe a year in duration, how are you going to keep up that project or that program and that momentum going forward? And right now, when we are talking about our post-COVID future, we have an inkling of what that looks like right now, but no one knows for sure when that's going to come. So in terms of grant writing, I would say practice some of these new innovations you're coming up with, but keep that documentation of the why and the change and the responses to those changes, and let the funder know that you're testing out new opportunities to maintain retention and consistency in your programming and organizational infrastructure, but that it may not work the way that we're doing things now when we enter into the future. And funders are being so flexible right now, and they are asking for that. And now is the time to practice some of those things, but really outreach to those funders and share that documentation with them, because they like to follow along the progression because they're making an investment in making a difference.
So Rebecca, one of the sections that I often see I see grants on the back end when people are sending in their reports, right, for money that they already have. And one of the things that's in that report at the end of the year is usually a section on lessons learned, right? Mm-hmm. What did you do this year? And how have you adapted? And it seems to me, let me know if you agree, that if you're keeping a learning journal, that section should be very easy to write at the end of the year.
If you're keeping a learning journal, so there's a fine line, because oftentimes organizations or grant writers will get scared of how much do I tell them was a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing is, we all heard the term transparency. I mean, we throw that around all the time, but what does it actually mean? It means being upfront and realistic about what are the challenges that presented and how did you move forward from those challenges, right? It's not just sharing that difficulty, it's solution-based. It's proposing, here's where we're going to go next. And that's a really tough question for folks to answer, because what we want to do is emphasize the successes. But what the funder is looking for sometimes is, wow, they faced a challenge head on. They came up with a great solution. It maybe worked, maybe it didn't. They told us about it. Maybe we want to invest in year 2 or 3 or 4 with them to keep that going until they get to that end result that they're, ultimately desire for the community.
See that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a level of sophistication that comes with the knowledge you gain from your learning. I've not been in a position of giving grants, but I know a lot of foundation folks, and I would imagine a good day is when a CEO or an executive director comes and says, this is where we were. These are the adaptations we made and why. And this is where we're going to land. And we're tracking this. And I want to talk to you about partnering. There's got to be a level of sophistication to that versus, oh my God, this is really hard and we're still scrambling. Not that you can't be honest and scrambling is a bad thing. We're all scrambling. Trust me, we're all different levels, but we're all scrambling.
Yep.
But when you think about how to show up as a leader and to engage partners, having this documentation becomes an important tool and catalyst to engage other partners.
You know who they want to hear it from is not just the EDs and I call them the suits, right? The people who show up in the suits, the decision makers. Yeah. They want the stories, right? I mean, Cynthia, we have to do a storytelling segment. You are just unbelievable at that. So they want the stories from the clients to say, this is where I was. This organization, this business helped me, and this is where I got to, right? Or this is what I'm going through. And then they want the frontline workers to say, this is how we're helping people, boots on the ground, with making a difference and giving them what they need and solving crises with them, right? Not for them, with them. Yeah. And these are still some of the challenges I face as a client, I face as a service delivery person, right? A case manager, and as an executive director. So it's a collective dialogue that funders want, not just to hear from the people in the suits. And secondly, CC says, yes, I meant technology.
I want to come back to C's point about partnerships. And if one of the resources that you have lost is the availability of a public partner around something like technology. Because I think that that's a really interesting point to explore. And there are a few potential solutions. I mean, there are really concrete workarounds, like organizations that have had fundraisers to send their participants Chromebooks so that they can, continue to talk to them that way. Organizations that are doing their coursework on Facebook Live because they've discovered that, people have access to phones and it might be easier for people to participate that way. But I think that this is also an opportunity to think like, so what other partnerships potentially exist? Because that's something else that's really really crucial going forward in our pared down models.
I think also what I realize is that our infrastructure has really been supporting our towns and state, and I'm sure this is happening nationally, but our cable service companies are offering all kinds of, well, I can't advertise for them because I don't know all the details, but I was really surprised when I had a cable issue the other day, checking out the website, and there are things that they're offering to families. I think things like free internet and stuff like that for a time period, but those time periods may be extended. I mean,
we're discovering, right? I mean, I think we're discovering now that internet access is basic infrastructure like electricity and water.
Yeah.
The role of those organizations is going to change.
Maybe imagine if we get internet access the way we have access to parks. They're free. They're in our community. Anybody can grab it.
The city of Boston has a program like that, with the goal. Really? Yeah, there is a City of Boston internet access program. Free like parks. Yeah. That's
awesome. Because I'll tell you something, and this is Ceci's point, and I'm so glad she used public libraries, because I love libraries. I still go to them, and libraries are important, and they have adapted. If you look at the histories of libraries, I mean, you go in now and some of them look like teen centers. They really are. And I actually think that's cool. I mean, when you want some peace and quiet, you're like, oh my God, this is a teen center. But it's nice to walk in and hear young people laughing, right, and sharing ideas and just being themselves. And, even the seating areas are nice and cool in libraries now. And so our local library in New Haven, Connecticut has a cafe, and the cafe is all windows. And then 1/3 of it looks out to the library. So I could be in the cafe, but I feel engaged in the library. So kudos to libraries. Yay for continuing.
And that is a great example of taking your logic model, right? Your logic model is simply like, we do this and then these things happen, right? And realigning it around your goals at this particular moment in time. So the libraries have a mission of community access and information sharing. They used to have one path that they got there, and now they've incorporated a lot of additional paths and made these resources available to a lot of people, which is another reason that maintaining a logic model in any form and using your logic model to document your adaptations and changes is really important. You can get a copy of the logic model that I like in the link above, but it is simply, don't get carried away thinking that it has to be really complicated. It is lines and arrows.
I love that you said that you are so pro logic models, and I've gained a much deeper appreciation. But I'm realizing that clients I work with, nonprofit organizations, are putting out those logic models that now when you need structure and you need to understand where to pinpoint where the adaptation needs to happen, that sheet of paper or those sheets of paper are really helpful.
That's exactly how to use it. Take out your logic model, take a red pen and mark the things that don't work right now, right? And then problem solve around that and create your new logic model. I mean, what a great, clean way to document the innovations that you're making that don't require starting from scratch.
Yeah. And so, Peter, I just want to give you a minute to tell people where they can go for a sample logic model that you have, which is easy to use, and then we'll close out.
There is a link to the sample logic model. I think it's above this video, but you can also find it below. It's near this video at blog.logic-model-guide-form.
Cool. Okay, so we are almost at the half-hour mark, and the last couple of times we started with what are some bright spots. I think closing today with what I want to call big wins helps to close this conversation in a really positive note. We are aware how hard this is. There is no denying that. And yet we are being called to lead during this time and show up as our best self. And if you really pay attention, there are some big wins. Well, there's some small wins, but we can make big deals out of them. So, just as a way to wrap up, Pina, do you have a big win this week?
I do. So I have two big wins. I'm going to share both of them. One is personal. Last night, the three of us talked, and I had set for myself 3 self-care targets for today, and I accomplished 2 of them before dinner last night. So that is a big win for self-care.
Yeah.
A big win for maintaining metrics. And my second big win is one of my favorite clients sent me some really great feedback on some logic models that they've been developing for new programming. And it's really cool to see their thinking evolve and crystallize, and their understanding of what they're going to be doing in these new programs is so vivid for me, and that's exciting.
That's awesome. Awesome. Rebecca, do you have any big wins this week?
Always. Everyone's a big win. So I had 11 students this week, which is awesome.
Yes.
Great.
And we have, my clients and I, 6 grants under review. So that's awesome. They made it through the preliminaries and now they're being reviewed. So everyone keep your fingers crossed.
You have such exciting work. Like, the anticipation is always great. And when you win, it's a big deal. It really is.
Yeah.
So,
but even if we don't receive the funds, no means new opportunities. So what are we going to pursue next time? So no is not no forever.
How did you fail forward?
We're failing forward. We're failing together. I have a bunch of big wins. One is that I usually, when I'm cleaning my house or trying to declutter, donate a lot of my stuff, because it's just easier to put it in the trunk and drive to the Goodwill, and nothing's open, or I haven't even checked, but I don't think they're open. What my husband has taught me is that we could put these things on like the Facebook Marketplace or some other online tag
sales.
Yeah. And people buy them. We are selling stuff like we would have thrown out, or I would rather donate, but it's like, oh, this is valuable to somebody. So my house is little by little looking more and more decluttered. And if you see me for sale on Facebook Market,
okay, I'll try not to buy any stuff.
His loss is mine.
Just don't sell your whiteboard.
We have a great free share site in my neighborhood where people just post things that they don't need anymore, or people post things that they do need, and that's been really great. I've given away coffee grinders, old iPhones, books. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. It's fantastic.
There's a market. Somebody came the other day and bought half a pack of light bulbs that we don't need that we don't use anymore. So there's a market for everything. So that's my big win. Rebecca.
Yeah. We have one more remark. So
wonderful.
CMM, we have to follow up with her offline because she's really into this. So thank you. She's a rock star today. So she says, I think access to technology can be a barrier for some people. And I love libraries because they are multi-generational, accessible to all, and they bridge that information gap that is essential to post-COVID-19 life. Ooh.
Oh,
yeah.
So don't even get us started on that.
You gotta love those libraries. We have to love those.
It's really interesting to see how libraries adapt in the post-COVID future. I mean, maybe that would be a really great guest to bring on.
Yeah, bring a librarian or someone.
Yeah, to see like how are they thinking about their role in communities if they have to reopen without physical spaces, or if they have to reopen with social distancing and things like that.
Awesome. Okay, well, it is a couple of minutes over, but we had a great conversation, and we're so glad you participated. And C from Vermont, thank you for your comments and your questions, and everybody else who introduced themselves, and those who are going to listen and watch once this recording goes up. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next week at 10:30 at Coffee Time with Masterminds. Bring your coffee. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.